let's talk about something that's probably sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now. We're going beyond just the toothbrush and floss today to really dive into the science of chemical plaque control.
You know the feeling, right? You brush, you floss, you do everything you're supposed to do. But then you go to the dentist, and what do they find? Plaque. It's this relentless problem. So if just scrubbing isn't enough to win the war, what else do we have in our arsenal?
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a handle on the problem itself. Then, we'll build the perfect chemical toolkit. We'll look at the agents you see every day, the one dentists call the gold standard, and some really cool next-gen stuff, before tying it all together into a winning strategy. Okay, first things first. Before we talk about the solutions, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what these chemical agents are actually supposed to do. This is probably the most important takeaway of the whole explainer. Chemical plaque control is a supplement. Let me say that again. A supplement, not a replacement. Think of it as the trusty sidekick to your toothbrush, not a magic potion that lets you skip brushing. So if we were in the lab trying to design the ultimate plaque-fighting superhero, what powers would we give it? Well, it turns out scientists have a very specific checklist for that. And here it is, the wish list for the perfect plaque fighter. You'd want it to be selective, so it only goes after the bad guys. It needs substantivity, which is just a fancy word for staying power. It has to stick around to work. Of course, it also needs to be stable, get deep into plaque, be safe for you, and, the holy grail, have no side effects like staining your teeth. It's a really high bar.
And these agents get into our mouths in all sorts of ways. We're all familiar with toothpastes and mouth rinses, but they also come in sprays, gels, even chewing gums. And your dentist can use professional-grade varnishes for a more high-powered dose.
All right, let's move on to the agents you're most likely to find on the shelf at your local drugstore. These are the workhorses, the everyday defenders in the fight against plaque.
Now this chart really shows you how far we've come. The first generation of agents could cut plaque by about 50%, which is pretty good. But look at that leap to the second generation, up to a 90% reduction. So what was the game changer? It all comes back to that word, substantivity. The newer agents are just way, way better at sticking around and doing their job.
Let's look at some familiar faces. Listerine, for example, uses oils that literally destroy the cell walls of bacteria. Then you have things like Triclosan, which makes those bacterial membranes leaky. And metallic ions like zinc have a totally different strategy. They basically mess with the bacteria's metabolism so they can't grow as fast.
But among all these different chemical fighters, there is one that's in a league of its own. It's the one that everyone else is trying to beat.
This quote really says it all. Chlorhexidine is the benchmark, the gold standard. So you have to ask, what makes it that good?
The secret is its absolutely incredible staying power. We're talking up to 12 hours of active duty in your mouth. That is just a huge leap forward.
And the science behind it is actually pretty cool. You know how opposites attract? Well, chlorhexidine has a positive charge, and almost every surface in your mouth, your teeth, your gums, has a negative charge. So it literally acts like a magnet, sticking to everything and getting released slowly over those 12 hours.
It also has this really clever 1-2 punch. At low doses, it's bacteriostatic. Think of it as just pausing the bacteria, stopping them from growing. But at higher concentrations, it becomes bactericidal. Now, it's not just pausing them, it's actively taking them out.
So if it's so amazing, why isn't it in every single toothpaste? Well, even the gold standard has its drawbacks. The big one is that it can cause brownish staining on your teeth. It can also mess with your sense of taste for a bit. That's why it's a clinical tool, something you'd get from your dentist for a short-term problem, not something you'd use every day for years.
So where does science go after the gold standard? Let's take a look at the next wave of plaque fighters, which are using some really innovative strategies.
These new approaches are fascinating because they think differently. Delmopinol doesn't even kill bacteria. It just makes plaque less sticky and easier to brush away. Probiotics are all about introducing good bacteria to crowd out the bad guys. And xylitol is like a Trojan horse. The bad bacteria eat it thinking it's sugar, but they can't digest it, and it gums up their whole system.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here. So after all that science, what is the big takeaway? How do you put this all together into a practical strategy?
It all boils down to this. This is the winning formula. It's not about choosing one or the other. The absolute best defense is a team effort. The brute force of mechanical cleaning from your brush and floss, combined with the smart, targeted backup from chemical control.
And that brings us to the end.
We've seen agents that kill, agents that block, and even agents that use good bacteria to fight the bad. It really makes you wonder, as our understanding of that tiny little ecosystem inside our mouths gets better and better, what's the next revolutionary tool going to look like? Thanks for watching.